G'day campers, welcome to yet another episode of the Snowy's Camping Show. As usual, joined by Lauren and myself, Ben. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or via your favourite podcast app so you get all of our awesome content, and we'd love to see more people in the Snowy's Camping Show Facebook group where we talk about these episodes and anything else you want to talk about, camping, hiking, four-wheel driving, or caravan related. Today, it's tent and sleeping arrangements related. And we're covering a question that we get quite a lot, and that is, can I fit a stretcher in that tent?
What stretcher? Will this stretcher fit in this tent?
Yeah, which is really hard one to answer. And a long time ago, we've got some information you've kindly printed out here from a blog article that I wrote a long time ago, and I ran around with a tape measure. And
we need to revamp this, I reckon.
We probably do, yeah, because I come up with a really sort of rough way of trying to work out if you can fit a stretcher in certain styles of tents. And I was running around the shop on my hands and knees.
It's rough, but it's great.
Measuring, I was doing trigonometry, I think you call it. The height and sort of, because I was considering the slope of the sides of the tent and how high a stretcher is and how much space you lose with the height of the stretcher. And then I think
Pythagoras
I did the stupid diagram that was, Pythagoras would be proud.
Yeah.
I think I did the stupid diagram. I don't know if it's on the blog article
anymore. It looks like
anymore.
you've drawn it with paint.
I probably did because people wanted to know, can I fit a stretcher in the tent? And it's really hard to say yes, no, or otherwise, because every stretcher is a different height. Every tent's got a slightly different shape or sloping walls.
And the reality is we can't test every stretcher in every tent.
No, many combinations. But we have measurements for tents, which is the floor area.
Yeah.
That's a really good indication for a mat. So even a mat up to, say, 20 centimetres high possibly, you can go pretty reliably off the floor dimensions of the tent. The mat might sort of push on the side a little bit, but it's largely usable space. But a stretcher, and we're talking about stretchers that are 40 between
on
30
average,
and 50.
they're about 45 centimetres.
45 centimetres for an average height of a stretcher. You put that in there. You raise the sleeping height up 45 centimetres off the ground.
Not factoring in a mattress height as well, if you want to go a mattress on top of that.
Adds more, right? And then you've got the sloping sides of the tent. So that space that you've actually got to sleep in becomes less.
That's right.
So I picked a bunch of different styles of tents and thought I'll try and categorize them. So I used like cabin style tents, dome tents, touring tents, because they've all got kind of a different shape. So the cabin style tents being like Coleman Instant Up. Some of you get really large.
Yeah, like even your Oztrail fast frames, Coleman Instant Up, some of your Black Wolf turbo tents.
Yep, because they've got largely upright sides.
Yeah, like
they slope a little bit.
And then the top, they slope a tiny bit on the four corners, and then the roof is
that's right.
Yeah.
So I think, no, we haven't written down here what I actually used for this article, but I reckon it was a 45 centimetre high stretcher. Yep.
Yeah, it definitely was.
And the length, do you remember?
197 maybe?
Well, yeah, so fairly standard sort of stretcher. So for a boxy style tent, so one that's got big flat sides, reasonably upright sort of walls, I worked out about 15 centimetres. You'd have to take off each end in order to fit a stretcher comfortably, and I'm pretty sure it's from wall to wall.
So when you say, but you mean when you say 15 centimetres, you mean 15 centimetres from where the wall meets the floor, 15 centimetres out into the floor, and then
45 centimetres up.
45 centimetres is where you hit the stretcher. So hypothetically, if you want to put your stretcher against the side of the tent, or, in one corner of the tent, that's the front and the back and the side wall that you're needing to take
15 centimetres
off.
The slopes. Yep.
So for example, if you have a 200 by 200 centimetre or 2 metre by 2 metre tent.
If we say it's a cabin style tent,
in that cabin style, then you are at stretcher height, you're cutting that 2 metres by 2 metres down. If you're putting it right against the wall, you're cutting that to, what does that make it? 85, 70. 1.7 metres by 1.85.
Yep. And even at that stage, you're right, probably on the edges of the tent. Now, this is not an exact science.
It's not an exact science, but it's a good point to note, because in that particular situation, 1.75 is not going to fit
I don't think you can get
a stretcher in.
that short. So yeah, but most tents, like a 4-person tent, will be about 240 by 240. That's probably a fairly standard 4-person size. So so that gives you about 2.1. Yep. Most users, I don't know what the average height is. I'm 185, so I'd fit okay in that. Add sleeping bag and pillow. I'm probably still going to be just touching the insides of the tent a little bit at that height.
Yeah.
So but the whole premise of this was to try and give people some guide,
a guideline,
to understand, like, if you're really on the boundaries of this, then it's probably going to get a bit tight, and you're going to end up with like the inner of the tent kind of up against your forehead, and
ultimately you can do that, but it becomes a problem, especially if your tent inner is pushing closer to the fly, where you have condensation or, you know, anything like that. You can create a wicking point.
Yep. And then your sleeping bag, your feet end up wet or your pillow ends up wet. So, yeah. So 15 centimeters for
those more boxy cabin style.
Yeah, we've got fast frame written here. Is that what the new Oztrail ones are also called fast frame?
The Oztrail Lumos, which is the current ones, they've got the lighting system inside. The ones before that didn't have the lighting system were fast frames.
Yeah, so they're pretty much similar design.
They're pretty much the same.
As the Coleman Instant tents are really popular. And the Black Wolf Turbo tents have got that kind of boxy kind of shape. So that's a guide for those. Dome tents was a bit more.
We don't really sell dome tents anymore, do we?
I don't know why. Dome tents are a classic.
Dome tents are amazing, but I don't actually know if many brands make them anymore.
No, there's a few pretty basic ones.
Senpai Neo, man, they're the best. They've got like what is it? They've got the 4 that go across, and then they've got a 5th and a 6th loop that go
geodesic.
It's geodesic. Man, they are so strong. They're like bomb proof.
We just said that we may have been seen to be a bit biased towards Empire with our episodes last season, but we can't stop saying good things about them.
Yeah, they're neat. Those Neo tents are amazing.
It's purely like just what we think.
Yeah,
the
cool thing about those ones though is whilst they're a traditional dome tent, meaning, you know, they're not telescopic poles. What do you call the poles? The elastic poles that all fold down.
Yeah, like fiberglass or whatever. Aluminium.
But because of that geodesic frame structure, they're a bit more, the walls are a bit more upright.
Right. So
those ones.
This is why.
But if you use a proper dome, which only has the 2 crosses, you're looking at more like 20 centimeters.
And that's what this one was for, 3-4-person dome tent. So usually those ones that just have 2 poles crossing, so the sides slope a fair bit more. And this is why it's never an exact science, right? Because dome tents come, like you said,
in all different,
more and more nowadays, all these manufacturers are trying to create walls that stand more upright on the sides to create more internal space around that sleeping area. So it's going to be different for every type of tent. But for a small 3 to 4-person dome tent, you're going to lose 40 centimeters if you put a stretcher in there, which for a, you know, say 240 by 240, sometimes less than that size tent, you're losing. It's really not going to work with a stretcher in there.
And I want to backtrack as well, back to the cabin style tents, because the Coleman Instant tents do fit into that category. But if you're going for something like the North Star or the Oztrail Lumos, I think the 10 or the 12, the front and the back walls are fairly upright, but those side ends taper down quite significantly. So you're losing a lot more than 15 centimetres there.
Just on one side though.
Just on that one side. So if, you know, those 2 bedrooms on the end, the front and back wall, you can account for 15 centimetres, but the side wall is going to be a lot more than that because it's a lot more sloped.
Yeah. So that might still be better because you could put stretchers sort of lengthways. So you've got your head and your foot against the upright ends. And if you can fit them side by side, the person sleeping against that slopey end might just be close to the wall.
Yeah.
But you've just got that one side to consider. And every time we'll get on a few a bit later where the configuration is different. So there's only one wall that you need to take that measurement off of.
Yeah.
Actually, this might the next one with the extended room on touring tents.
Oh, right. Sorry, I backtracked, but I should have just gone ahead.
Well, this is probably relevant for what you said about the North Star, which is a great tent, but it has got slopier ends on it. So there's usually just one wall here. So the extended room I'm referring to is the Turbo Plus versions, which have got their front standard square
and
room.
Then the extensional bit on the back.
That's right. And that slopes down to the back. And it's quite considerably sloped. And I remember when I did this, Oztent had Fox. I can't think of the name of it now. They had a turbo tent style, jet tent, sorry, is the name I think
right,
of.
okay.
And they sloped a long way out. They were quite long, but they sloped to a really pointy sort of section, and you end up with quite a lot of unusable space on the end. So you got to take about 25 centimeters at least off on those slopey ends. But as you mentioned before, the sides are more upright. So it's only that very back end that you've got to take that space off of. You can kind of get around that by maybe pushing bags and stuff there, which will lift the back wall up a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe things that if there is a bit of condensation, it doesn't matter if it gets wet, and then you sleep on the inside of that. So there are ways around that when you've got the upright walls otherwise. And
the only thing to consider, sorry, I just sort of cut you off there. If you have those style tents and like the North Star, Lumos 10 and 12 ones that have those side rooms with the slope, is that where you stand in the doorway to look at those rooms, the slope is going to be immediately sort of in front of you. So most people, when they walk into a room, they want their stretchers to be on either side. So you've got this corridor of walking space. And the reality is that's not possible.
No, not unless you're going to have your head up against the.
But even still, a lot of them won't fit. And so if you are using those types of tents with those super sloped rooms, your best option is to either go with one of those low-rise stretchers, which is more of that 20, 25 centimetre height, or just go on mat.
Yeah, mats are great anyway.
That's awesome.
15 centimetre self-inflating mats.
Yeah.
Now, I did actually separate, I realised I was reading down here, I did actually separate the bedrooms of family dome tents is what I've noted here. So that is that North Star style tent that it's really well to open that bottle there without using your hands at all.
Yeah.
Hands-free camelback hydration.
Yeah.
So that's the North Star style tent, and there was also like the Coleman Chalet was a popular tent.
Yeah,
and
Chalet 9.
So
I had one of those.
They were a great tent. Yeah, I don't know if they're actually available anymore. I don't think they are. No. So they're a dome tent, but they're a large family style dome tent, so they don't kind of fit into that 3-4 person category, which is why we've separated them out. And they have a central room and then 2 rooms off the ends. But those end rooms do slope. And I actually found in the ones I measured, which was more than likely, I don't remember for sure, but more than likely the Coleman Chalet. But I've also noted like Outdoor Connections, Badara, Outdoor Connection do really good family tents. And it can be up to 30 centimetres for those rooms. They slope out a little bit more. So if you've got, I don't know, let's just say a 220 centimetre room, you're down to 190 centimetres.
If you're wanting to orient your stretcher in that direction.
Yeah, side by side with that, like you said before, with the walkway down the middle. 190, and that becomes a short stretcher then. So
yeah. I think majority of stretchers are 196, 7, 8, up to 2, 3, 4, 2, 203, 4, 5. You know what I mean? Between 195 to 205.
Yeah. Oztents are a different setup. So you've only got a slope on one side and they're upright walls on the other 3. So you only need to take the measurement off one side, but that back wall does slope a lot.
That back wall slopes so much.
Yeah.
That's like that catches a lot of people out, I think.
Yeah. So 35 centimetres. Now I haven't, sorry.
Also, I was going to say, being a single skin tent, if you're not using the fly with it, it's even more important that you don't have your stretcher pushing up against the edges.
Yeah. It's probably also another consideration for the single skin or any tent really, that if your stretcher is against the edge is a rub point, and if it's really windy,
that is really true.
It might sort of think, oh, it's not sharp. Over time, it will eventually wear a point in the tent. Not saying don't do that. Just be aware that if that's how you're going to set it up and use it, that's potentially something you might have to repair down the track. But 35 centimetres for the Oztents is what I came up with for that 45 centimetre high stretcher. Now I use an Oztent RV 5 and I sleep my family 4 in there quite comfortably, but we just use like a 10 centimetre mat or like hike mats or 10 centimetre camp mats, and we sleep with our feet against the door and our head kind of comes up just past where the pole is, and then we push our bags at the back. And that kind of lifts it up. And that gives us enough room. The wall is close to my head. I'm 185. But that's comfortable enough. The stretcher, though, I think would be quite uncomfortable. I think we've actually done a video on all the Oztent RV range, and I did put a stretcher in all of them to show how they'd fit. And for the most part, they were rubbing against that back wall.
Yeah.
Now, with an Oztent single skin tent, that's your waterproof barrier. If you're rubbing that inside coating, then you potentially causing a leak issue there. So
and if you're going with, that's another example of going with a low rise stretcher. a low rise option, which is more that 25, 30 centimetres.
Yep.
Just that drop in 15 centimetres high, if it still works for you, because I understand that stretches for a lot of people come down to mobility.
Yeah.
If a low rise still works for you, it's an awesome option.
Yep, absolutely. But you can fit the stretcher in lengthways though. So you can move it away from it easily fits lengthways because it's 260 long or something like that. So
definitely.
One stretcher in RV5.
So running from side to side. Yeah.
I think most of the Oztents actually you can fit. The RV1 actually I'm not sure on now.
RV1 doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, sorry, it doesn't, does it? So most of the Oztents you can fit one stretcher in comfortably.
Yeah.
Two, you can only realistically fit two in an RV5 and even then it's tight.
Yeah.
You can put them sort of crossways as you walk in, but then the person on the back stretcher's got to walk over the person on the front stretcher to get in.
It's not super great, is it?
Not as suitable, and it probably negates the mobility issues that you might be using a stretcher for anyway. So, now 45 centimeters for tents with an extended back wall. I don't actually know why I said extended back wall, but the tents we've noted here is the Safari 350 and the extended 2.5. So they're really basic setup. The Safari being that single pole tent. It's got like a single pole in the middle.
They used to call them Legionnaires tents. When I was a kid, that's how, it's just like a big square and it goes up like a little pyramid with a pole in the middle.
Yep.
And then you can get the ones that have that extra space at the back and it's got like almost like a horseshoe shape pole that goes across the back.
So that
holds it up.
I think, you're right. That's what I would be referring to there. But those tents, they're rock solid, right? There's 4 pegs, 1 pole, and they're the
best.
Simple.
They're probably classic, one of the most underrated tents.
Absolutely,
ever.
Just a classic. Keep it simple. Keep it stupid simple. Keep it simple stupid scenario with tents. You just can't go wrong.
Simon.
There's nothing. Keep it simple, Simon. You can't go wrong with them.
No, you can't.
There's not a lot of internal space. They're really just for sleeping. You can stand up in the middle, and just the front bit does slope down considerably, so you lose a bit of space around the edge. And some of them come as an extended version, as you mentioned, with that extra bit out the back. So
there are other what am I trying to get out of my mouth here? Extended tents like that attached to awnings and like your tag-alongs, Foxwing tag-alongs and things like that. They're pretty steep as well.
Yep.
Are they more in for example, Foxwing tag-along, is that more steep than an RV, do you reckon?
Not an RV. So Foxwing tag-along versus RV tag-along or RV tent, do you mean?
Just like an RV tent.
RV tent.
RV tag-along, because I think the Foxwing's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think they're probably more slopey.
Yeah.
You probably lose a bit more space in those because there's not as much structure in the frame to kind of keep it up and away. They're a little bit simpler.
Yeah, so Darchi do an extender as well, and then which is a nifty little tent because that attaches. It is another underrated tent. It attaches to their 2.5 pull-out awning, and you can also attach it to their 2 metre awning if you want, just with a bit of overhang. But you can unzip it and drive away, and it's freestanding.
Just got to remember to mark your wheel, so that you park in exactly the same spot again.
But I think also for people who potentially like the idea of using the porticos for the Oztrail gazebos and things like that as well, if you're a fair weather camper and you're not going to be in terrible rain and things, they're a good option. That have the similar issue with that super sloped back wall.
Yeah. So moral of the story is if you're buying a tent, you can fairly safely use the floor dimensions for a mat.
Yes.
Up to a single high airbed, I would say.
I'd say sort of 10 to 15 centimetres maybe.
Yeah, probably a good guide. You can go by because that's going to come up to roughly where the bucket floor in most tents meet, which is generally upright, and then the walls slope from there. If you're wanting to use a stretcher, you need to have a real think about the design of the tent, how much space you want there, how comfortable you want to be. Because even though it may be a 5-person tent, you might think, surely I can fit 2 single stretchers in there. Not always the case. You can put 2 single stretchers in an RV5, which is comfortable for tight 5, but you don't have much space for anything else. You do have the storage space underneath the stretcher, but you can't. You lose a lot of space when you put a stretcher in a tent.
You do lose a lot of space comparatively. Yep. Although I guess some people, would be able to argue, but you can put stuff underneath it and you can store stuff underneath it, which is fair.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that the head and foot space. And it's not comfortable sleeping.
Are massively popular.
They are.
They like walk out the door, and I've never understood it personally.
Maybe as I get a little older, I may appreciate it. But with the
surely
mats
it's not just, people with mobility issues.
No, I think a lot of people use it to put a swag on, so that then is it kind of the other way around. You're not putting it in a tent; you're putting a shelter on the stretcher. But yeah, I mean, I look at the mats that are out now. Exped Mega Mat's a classic that's been around, but Zempire have got one now. Oztra have now brought out a 15 centimetre mat.
Yeah.
There's so many of these closed cell foam mats that offer really good comfort and really good insulation from the ground, whether it's hot or cold ground.
Yeah, definitely.
Well above what a stretcher does, because a lot of stretchers are just a thin bit of fabric, so they don't offer the insulation from underneath.
That's right. Often if you are getting a stretcher, you need to have a significantly higher rated sleeping bag, or you need to combine it with a mattress or another insulative layer.
That's right, yeah. So it's more to set up, more that moves around. So,
yeah.
But that's my 2 cents worth. I think we're probably on the same page.
I'm a bit the same. I've often been like, oh, why would you go stretcher? Because, they're bigger, they're bulkier, they're heavier. I don't necessarily find them more comfortable.
I don't remember when I last stretched.
And I think when I was a kid, I reckon we used one, and I felt like it was a good quality one, but every single time I turned over, I could feel the whole thing, wobbling. And
the other thing to consider with stretchers is the tent floor as well, and the feet on the tent floor moving around, creating.
Convince us, stretcher lovers of the world, convince us.
Make us buy a stretcher.
That we need to buy one.
Maybe when I'm older.
Yeah.
But do check out the mat. So, because you might find you buy a stretcher, you're cold, and then you want a mat to put on top of it anyway, and suddenly you're even higher in the tent. So have a good think. I'm not saying you can't put a stretcher in a tent. You just need to have a think about what you want with a stretcher, how much space you want in the tent, how you want to use the space, because a stretcher significantly reduces the amount of living and sleeping space in a tent. Probably increases storage space because you've got all that space under the stretcher. But
that's true.
If you want to actually stand up and sit on the side of your stretcher, those ideas you had about just sitting on the side of your stretcher, have a think about how high you are and where the wall is anyway, because you might find you're hunched over.
That's right.
So,
or you might not have much leg room.
Yeah.
Like just because 2 stretchers might in theory fit in there, also take into consideration how much walking space you want and how easy you want to be able to move through your tent and get in and out of your stretcher. And if there's 2 of you in there, do you want to be climbing over one person to get to the other one at the back? And
if it is just like 2, maybe you just need to buy a bigger tent to fit 2 in there comfortably to make you, comfortable camping. But anyway, that's my 2 cents, or our 2 cents worth.
Yeah.
I'm fitting a stretcher in a tent. Have a think about it. We don't have an answer when you say, can I fit this stretcher in that tent? We're not going to have a straightforward answer.
No.
We'll go by this guide here, which is on our blog.
It is on our blog. We'll
update
it. We'll get to it soon.
Yeah, but let us know your thoughts on stretchers. Try, as Lauren said, convince us.
Yeah. Convince us to use a stretcher.
You can do so on the Snowy's Camping Show Facebook group. And as we mentioned before, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any of this awesome content either on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. But that's it for today. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.
See you later.